when I got diagnosed with cancer, I kind of had that same reaction, but then I said, wait a second, let me just do a little bit of a deep dive, and see if I can figure out exactly what the cause is.
This is one of my favorite episodes, and this is one of my favorite people to be able to sit down with. Hey, it's Chris Dufay, and you're watching Breaking Success. This is the show, this is the movement that gives you the backstage pass for you to build the body, business, and life that you love. I'm going to introduce you to Eric in just a minute, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he cured himself of that cancer. We go deep into that in this episode. We talk about why cancer should be looked as cancering, why Eric said no to chemotherapy, the steps that he took to heal himself, and what does he do to stay to thrive day in and day out. Now, when I first found out and heard about Eric's story, I made some drastic changes, and it has made a huge and positive difference to my life. Now, Eric and I would both love to hear from you after this episode, so really make sure you watch it all the way to the end. We're looking forward to chatting with you soon. I'm selfishly really excited for this. As we were just saying before we came out, before we hit the record button. When I first heard your story, selfishly, I was really going, oh my God, I'm resonating with what you're saying, and so many things were coming up, and I want to just dive straight into right now something that you said before, we even chatted about, and that was the verb cancering.
Okay.
Can you please explain, because I feel like I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I kind of like understood it, I heard it a little while ago, but the word cancering, why is that so important to you, and why do you think this is a big part of what it is that you want to share as well?
Okay, that's actually a great place to start, because I think there's this tremendous misconception, especially amongst not only in the medical community, the doctors, but the patients in particular, to think that this diagnosis is kind of a static condition.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the Newtonian linear theory of life.
Yeah.
Ignores the fact that we're living beings, and there's an ebb and flow of life that's constantly taking place. And so when a person is told by an oncologist you have cancer, they assume that they have some sort of fixed condition that they need to address immediately.
Yep.
And when I got diagnosed with cancer, I kind of had that same reaction, but then I said, wait a second, let me just do a little bit of a deep dive, and see if I can figure out exactly what the cause is of the disease. And the deeper I went down that rabbit hole, the more I can see that cancering really is a process. It's an evolutionary process where your cells, long before you're diagnosed with the disease, your cells have stopped going through the proper metabolic process. They're no longer respirating the way healthy cells respirate.
Yep.
And I call that cancering, because you have cells that can actually go from a defective metabolic process back to a healing process, depending on how far along down that road they've gone. And so if you step back and you look at it as a verb, and not as a noun, you can recognize that there's no reason why you can't transition back into a healing state, which is everybody's body is producing cancer cells all the time.
Yes.
The difference between someone who hasn't been diagnosed with the disease and someone like me who has is my body's been cancering for a long period of time.
Yes.
And by the time it shows up on a PET scan, it's pretty far along. It's several years down that process. So, the traditional medical system won't recognize it until they actually see the symptom of the disease, not the cause of the disease. And so I think if you use the verb cancering, you kind of step back and say, wait a second, I don't have this. Yeah. There's a process in my body. I need to fix it. I need to address it.
I think it's very empowering, because it does put the power back into, well, I can do something about it. So I feel like the story behind what cancer is, if somebody is diagnosed, it's a death sentence.
Right.
And it's not. And that's what I love about what you've been able to do it.
Right.
What's the story behind how you...
Okay, I think it's interesting maybe for your listeners to kind of get a little bit of a historical framework, because I wasn't somebody who got cancer and decided to become very healthy. I was somebody who was on the road to being healthy, or trying in my best to be healthy for a long period of time before I came down with the disease. And it really started, I think, after I moved from New York to Los Angeles, because when I lived in New York, I was a workaholic, I was a heavy smoker, I was a heavy drinker. I had all the classic symptoms of somebody who's going to have a very kind of unhealthy lifespan, if you will. Yep. And after I moved to Los Angeles, I gave up smoking, and I kind of got involved in trying to become physically fit. I was getting close to 40 years old, and I was looking pretty ratty, and I decided, I just gone through a divorce, I decided I needed to look good, and so I became a gym rat. I went to the gym every single day for an hour and a half, without fail. I don't care if it was 2 in the morning, I was at the gym. I wouldn't miss a day at the gym. And I did this for a couple of years, and I was also on the men's health diet, you know, the low-fat, high-protein, Myoplex shakes after you work out kind of routine. And I looked good for the first time in my life, because I didn't really have a lot of muscle definition when I was in New York. And so I started physically looking better, but I had some chronic health problems. And I only saw Western doctors. I only went down kind of the traditional allopathic medical approach. And I had a chronic condition that kind of led me to have my first exposure to traditional Chinese medicine. And I had really incredible results with this doctor. So much so that I was the investor, and we opened a holistic center in Montrose together.
Sorry, let me jump in.
Yeah.
What got you to go to traditional Chinese medicine?
Okay, it's kind of a funny story. All right, there was a class, I was working downtown Los Angeles, and across the street from my office was the Stuart Ketchum YMCA, and that's where I went every day when I was downtown. I also belonged to 24 Hour Fitness near my house. And there was a class on Tuesdays and Thursdays that got canceled, and it was replaced by another class that was kind of a yoga class. This was my first exposure to yoga. And the person who designed that workout was the doctor of Chinese medicine. And his name is Stephen Rogers, and he and I are still friends. And at the end of each class, it was his wife who taught the class, she would say, this is just one element of a holistic program that involves emotional health and nutritional health. And, you know, if you want to learn more about the rest of the programs, come see me after class. And so after class, of course, I had a griller on it. And, you know, a lot of the theories that kind of led to the holistic program were based on traditional Chinese medicine. And Stephen was classically trained as an acupuncturist, as a doctor of Chinese medicine. And so I had his number on a post-it next to my phone, and I had 2 kind of chronic conditions that were bothering me for a long period of time. I had a chronic cough for about 10 years. It would come and go pretty much with the seasons. And Stephen, well, we'll get to that in a second. And I also get up several times in the middle of the night to urinate. And so, but I didn't call him for those conditions. I called him because I was having some bowel issues, some serious bowel issues. And I saw my Western doctor, and he said, take Mylanta. And I took Mylanta over the counter and came back with a vengeance the next day. And it just was really hurting. So I had Stephen's number and his name next to my phone, and I said, let me just call this guy. You know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, at this point, I'll try anything. I had chest x-rays. I had gone through every test you could possibly imagine from standard doctors. And he literally diagnosed me over the phone. He said, take your shoes off. I want you to find sore spots on your feet. And they had me do the same thing at my elbows. I want you to find some sensitive areas. And so I did, and I explained to him where they were. And I was downtown LA, and he was in Culver City where he was living at the time, and he said, I have 2 questions for you. He said, do you have a chronic cough? Chris almost felt like shit. Right? And then he said, second question, do you get up in the middle of the night and urinate? Those are the only 2 questions he asked me. And at this point, I'm just flabbergasted, right? I'm floored. So, long story short, I was just completely sold at that point. So he wants to open a holistic center. Obviously, I don't know the first thing about Chinese medicine or energetic healing, but so I was the investor and he was the brains behind it. We opened the center up in Montrose. That's what got me started on that path. And that was in 1997, so it was 20 years ago. And it's funny, I don't know, you may have had the same experience, but I find the deeper I go down that rabbit hole to try to understand things that have to do with wellness and the broad, and you start seeing pieces of the puzzle and how they fit together, the more you want to go down that hole. And so I was doing that for a good almost 20 years. And I was the healthiest guy in the world, right? I had gone through a vegan diet, I had gone through a raw primal diet. Agenus Vanderplanets had this whole thing with raw meat, raw eggs, raw dairy, raw cheese, everything's raw, right? You just gotta have all the enzymes in the food. I did that diet. And I also evolved into kind of a Paleolithic diet and then ketogenic diet. This is all before I got sick, right? And I had this incredible shake that I made every day. And I muscle tested every ingredient in that shake. And you might have heard about this because it was on Ben Greenfield. I ran into Ben. I ran into Ben at a party across the street from the Paleo FX conference. Todd White was having a party at his house. And I showed Ben my ingredient list, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you crazy?" And then he asked me if he could post it on a blog post on his website. I said, "Absolutely." And so he did. He put a blog out with his ingredients. He said, "If you want to see really crazy, I don't know if I can say it, MF." He said, check this guy out. Now, I didn't know I was sick at the time, but that's when that was at that conference that I started having symptoms, that something wasn't right.
Wow.
So literally it was 2 days later. I think I saw him on a Friday night. It might have been Saturday or a day later. It was the last day of the conference. I had spasms in my bladder. and I was having trouble urinating. And I thought it was because I had tried out this electrostim device. It was on the exhibition hall floor. And I thought maybe I had just, because I was showing off to my friends and how tough I was, and I had to put in my lower abs and turn on full blast. And I remember standing there thinking, this is the most painful thing, but I have to pretend like it doesn't hurt at all because my friends are all watching me. I'm way too tough. I can't start crying like a baby. Anyway, so I thought maybe I messed up the nerves or something. But I got back from Austin, Texas, and a week later I saw a doctor for the first time in 10 years, right? Since I moved from Manhattan Beach to Santa Monica to see the doctor. And he ran some tests, including a blood test, and he said, you really need to see a urologist because your prostate is way enlarged. It doesn't feel healthy. And my PSA level is 21.1, which is very, very high. And so I saw a urologist, and of course, he ran a whole battery of tests. And the final test came in. I had a CT scan, a PET scan, an MRI, bone scan, and then I had the biopsy. And I remember when he called me, I was sitting at home, kind of just trying to get my mind off cancer when the phone rang at night, and he said, Eric, you have stage 4 cancer. Your test came back positive. You tested positive in all 12 sites. Gleason score 9, very aggressive. You need to see an oncologist immediately. And I remember thinking to myself, well, first I just was shocked, right? It was a complete shock. So almost like, when your blood sugar's low and you stand up and everything kind of blacks out. That's the way I felt, but it's more like just silence. It's like this white noise. And then when I came to my senses, one of the thoughts I had was all this desire to be healthy just a bunch of bunk, right?
Yeah.
All this work I had done in nutrition and yoga and exercise and fitness and meditation, was all this stuff kind of silly? Was I wasting my time? Does it really matter? If you're predisposed to get cancer, you're just going to get cancer anyway.
Yeah.
There's really nothing you can do about it. That was my first thought. And we can touch on kind of
Was it anger?
Well, it is anger. It's victimhood. There's a little victimhood there. Yeah, absolutely. But once I kind of stood back and kind of looked at the picture, I thought, holy shit! My passion for wellness now has something it can really sink its teeth into. Boy, oh boy, I needed a story to tell. Now I have a story to tell. And so
how long did that take for you to get to that dialogue?
About 3 days.
Wow, that's quick.
Yeah, and because I felt like I didn't have a lot of time too, and I was blessed because, I'm a lawyer, practicing lawyer, and my partner said take whatever time you need. And so I did a really, really deep dive, and I just kind of studied everything I get my hands on to try to really understand kind of the origin of the disease. And it's interesting because every time I got to a point like Otto Warburg's theory, which I'm sure your listeners are well aware of, I would then say, okay, fine, it's a respiratory issue, it's a mitochondrial dysfunction, but then what causes that?
Yes.
And then what causes that?
Behind it.
And so each layer of the onion, there's another layer, and another layer, and another layer. And I think where I finally stopped peeling the onion is when I kind of came to this whole idea that, at least in my view, and this is, everybody has their own experiences as to what might cause it. I mean, if they're exposed to radiation, obviously, it'd be a very different outcome. But in my view, it was an energetic issue. It was an energetic issue. And if you know traditional Chinese medicine, they talk a lot about qi. It's spelled QI, but it's pronounced qi. And that's kind of not just the meridians where they manipulate it using acupuncture, but it's really all of life. All of life energy is qi, right? It's kind of the source of all life. And as I understand it, again, this is just based on my understanding because I'm not classically trained, a lot of illnesses in the view of traditional Chinese medicine are caused by stagnation of qi. Right, where there's not that energy, it
doesn't move.
It's not moving, right? Because all of life needs to have. It's like stagnant water. Stagnant water doesn't stay healthy very long. It's got to be moving, and so I think that's a kind of a metaphoric example, and so it made perfect sense for me. The prostate, for me, right? Everyone's different, right? Is the source of all procreative and protocreative energy. And I was stagnant in both those areas for a long period of time, for like 4 years, a long period of time before I got sick. And so I said, okay, well that makes sense, but I still needed to understand now the qi a little better, right? And so I stumbled upon the works of Wilhelm Reich, who interestingly enough was a contemporary of Otto Warburg. He came a little after Otto, and they kind of knew each other. And they shared a lot of ideas, but they had some areas where they didn't necessarily agree. But what I found most fascinating about the works of Wilhelm Reich is he actually did kind of really high magnification, like 4,000 times magnification, and he would actually see life forms begin. right? These are what we call PA biomes. And those are the healthy ones. And all life has it. It's in the atmosphere, it's in water, it's in our bodies. And that's part of what I think that when you talk about qi, that's kind of a physical manifestation of what it would look like if you could actually take a picture of it.
Yeah.
And then he also talked about kind of the inverse of that, which is the T bacilli, the T biomes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the more degenerative version. That's when life is kind of going back to its roots, like decomposing.
Yeah.
I'll use decomposition as kind of a metaphor for that. And that, to me, was fascinating because he really did a lot of work in the area of cancer patients, in particular, looking at cancer cells and trying to really kind of understand all that stuff. And his books are basically lab notes. He's just sitting in a laboratory writing down all his notes. And I was not much of a scientist, but I just found it fascinating to sit there and read all his lab notes. Yeah. And he was prolific, right? He just wrote everything down, all his thought processes and all his analyses. And anyway, so okay, cut to the chase. The standard of care perspective on cancer is that it's a somatic mutation. There's a genetic defect, if you will, in the nucleus of the cell.
Like the original thought that you had, why did I bother doing all of this if I was just going to get it anyway?
Exactly. Warburg said it's not a DNA defect. It's the mitochondrial. He didn't know about the mitochondria. Pete Peterson discovered that later, but he said it's a respiratory issue. The mitochondria is where the respiration occurs within the cell. Right? That's the little organelle that creates energy, makes us warm-blooded creatures. And kind of once I saw that, and then I of course I read the works of Tom Seifried and Dom D'Agostino and a lot of folks. Travis Christophers' book Tripping Over the Truth to me is probably one of the seminal books. One of the things that Tom Seifried pointed to in coming to the conclusion, his book is Cancer is Metabolic Disease. It's like a textbook. It's a very dense book, but if you have a chance, if you haven't heard him speak, I highly recommend. If your listeners haven't heard him speak,
also I'll definitely add the links.
I'll
add the links to the books as well because I think Tripping Over the Truth and Cancer is Metabolic Disease are great reads.
They're both great reads. But he said, if you take the nucleus out of a healthy cell, and you put it into a cancer cell, taking the nucleus out of a cancer cell, technically that cell should stay healthy. Because if it's a DNA problem, and they don't, they either become cancerous or they die. And the opposite is true. If you take the nucleus out of a healthy cell, and then you replace the nucleus in a cancer cell, the cell will typically just stay healthy, right? So it's the mitochondria, it's something in the cytoplasm, not the DNA sequencing that's triggering the problem of the disease. And you can't ignore that research, but so much money has been spent for so many years kind of chasing this whole somatic theory of cancer that it's really hard, I think, for traditional oncologists who are classically trained to even consider other alternatives. Right? We've kind of been painted into a corner, if you will, as a result of that. So, if you can accept that premise, which is my theory, and again, I'm not a doctor, that it's a metabolic disease, then you can approach your treatment protocols on that basis. Otherwise, you're just looking at all these options, thinking, okay, what am I going to do, right?
How long did it take for you to start the deep dive?
Right.
To start gathering this is my next steps?
Yeah, I'd say that's a really good question because it was there wasn't a clear dividing line from A to B. And it was more like just adding things in as I go along. The first thing I did, which is interesting because I kind of stumbled upon it. I didn't really come into it thinking, I got to fast, right? I was reading a book, which I don't recommend, but it talked about doing the master cleanse. And so I went out and I bought a bunch of lemons and some cayenne pepper and some maple syrup, and I said, okay, I'm going to do the master cleanse for 10 days. And I had all this stuff sitting on my counter, and I didn't make it a day through that cleanse. My body was in sugar shock because I was in ketosis, and it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so I basically just turned to a water fast. I figured, let me just do a water fast. And I did a water fast for 8 days. That's kind of the first thing I did. And that, I think, turned out, in hindsight, to have been a very effective treatment protocol because I'm trying to remain at a very high level of ketones in my blood. And I find the most effective way to keep those numbers up is to regularly fast. Right? When you blood test, you can eat nothing but fat. You're still going to have, if you overeat, you're going to have blood sugar issues. And so fasting is a big part of my protocols. And it just so happened that I did an 8-day fast without having even studied any of the fasting material.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And kind of learning about
Interesting. Okay.
Don D'Agostino and who's his name? Walter Longo
Yep.
at USC.
Yep.
The guys who have really kind of done a good scientific study of that stuff. And I look back and I say, oh, I look pretty smart, don't I? But it was just happenstance.
Yeah. Okay. Where did the ketosis come into it then?
Well, I was already dabbling. I decided January 1st of that year where I got diagnosed. I got diagnosed in June, so 6 months later,
Yep.
I decided I had been paleo for a long time. I said, let me just try this keto.
Yep.
Let me just take out. I was doing sweet potatoes and just a little bit. I was probably 40, 50 grams
Right. Okay. Yeah.
a day, and I decided let me just take out all the starchy carbs and just go pure fat and just see how my body feels,
Yep.
see how I react to it. And it was easy. It was easy. It wasn't difficult to do.
Okay. You touched upon before, and I want to deep dive into that.
Mhm.
The shape, the smoothie.
Yes. Yes.
It was, and you kind of said even before you were on like the men's health diet. You know what I mean?
Right.
High protein,
Right.
low fat, and infrequently,
Right.
constantly feeding, and then
Yes.
you've suddenly come upon fasting,
Right.
which is very opposite.
Yes.
And especially in the whole health realm where people are wanting to get in shape, so much of it can be, you've got to eat 5, 6, 7 times a day. You're constantly
Right.
trying to feed yourself
Right.
to stoke your metabolism, which we know is actually debunked now.
Yes.
So where does this smoothie come in? And do you actually see this as a good thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question because at the time that I was doing that,
Yeah.
I was operating on the misguided notion that if a little is good, a lot must be great. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have suffered from that same malady.
100%.
And so I sat down and I could show you the list and you could put it on your show
Awesome.
notes if you want.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that shake. By the way. It's okay to do it,
Yeah.
but just don't do it every single day,
Yes.
which is what I was doing. And so my body never got a chance to go into autophagy. Right? It's like breathing in, breathing in, breathing in,
And
breathing in.
breathing out.
Eventually, you're going to explode. You got to give a chance to breathe out. Let things clean
Well, there's
themselves
the
out.
yang with the yin, and
Yes.
that's why I like the whole TCM model as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Wilhelm Reich talks about it. He said all of life, what got him in trouble
Yeah.
is he called it the orgone because he tied it back to orgasm. And in the 1930s, people were a little uptight about sex. So this whole concept of orgasm got him in a lot of trouble. And they had book burnings, they got rid of him. I mean, the guy was literally kind of crucified. But,
Yeah, right.
but he was brilliant. And he said single cellular organisms actually have a form of intercourse as
Wow.
part of their pulse and their growing and their
Yep.
pulse. And he said in human beings, because we're multicellular organisms, they're all kind of working in unison. When cancer cells, by the way, are, and we could talk about this, are kind of like prehistoric versions of what we are, right? If you have cells that are single cellular organisms before you had mammals on the planet,
Yeah.
right? They would basically proliferate. That
Yeah.
was their goal, was to proliferate. They weren't playing by any rules. And our bodies play by rules. But what kind of keeps us in check is our autonomic nervous system, which he said in a healthy person is always pulsating. It's
Yeah.
always going from sympathetic to parasympathetic.
Yeah.
Sympathetic. You need that movement. It's like keeping the water from being stagnant. Well, he said he noticed in cancer patients it was only shrinking. It was kind of going through a shrinking state. So you got to figure out, okay, how can I get back to what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So the shake, I think, is is a classic example of someone who sits down who's obsessive compulsive about this,
yeah.
and I study every little thing that I should possibly have.
Every nutrient.
And just make sure it's all in there, and I just have it every day.
Totally.
And now I do a different version of it, but I do it 2 or 3 days a week, and then I fast, and then
Yep.
do other things other days. But I give my body a chance to kind of assimilate.
Totally. I think to talk to the point, and so much of what we cover, and it's come up in this conversation already,
Right.
there's cycles between everything that's going on.
Right.
And I think a analogy that's worked with me for a little while now, let's say being Australian, was like the Aboriginals, where they would let the land flourish, and then they would
Right.
burn it down.
Right.
And then they'll let it flourish
That's
back
part
up
of the
again.
normal
Do you know what I
life,
mean?
yes.
You
Yeah.
burn it back down
Yeah.
and you start again. It's
Yes.
the yin with the yang, and it keeps coming around.
Yes.
And it's just like so much of the time, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And I think that's why so much of the health, the fitness, the wellness, all the information that can be out there, it's always got to have a goal and a context behind what's going on, because you can't just do the one thing forever.
Right.
You don't just fast forever. You don't
Right.
just overfeed forever.
Right.
It's got to come in ebb and flow.
That's right. And there's also this whole concept. It's interesting. I think the Nobel laureate 2016 was studied in autophagy. And he didn't obviously discover autophagy, but he kind of found a lot of genetic and kind of DNA predispositions that kind of supported the theories behind it. But autophagy, for folks that are not familiar, is when your cells can actually clean themselves out on an intracellular and intercellular basis. And it can't do that if you're feeding yourself, right? You have to go into this fasted state. So I think our bodies were designed to go for some period of time, every now and then, without a lot of food, without any food, perhaps, for a few days. And it's perfectly fine.
And if we can talk into that, where do you see fasting sit? Not in the cancering. Let's just say somebody's on a day-to-day health,
Right.
just trying to take care of themselves.
Right.
Where do you see fasting in the continuum sit?
I would say, I mean, if a person's ketogenic, fasting is pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
If you're not burning ketones, it's a lot more difficult because
Yeah.
you're going to, that first day is going to be really hard. I mean, even the first day for me is somewhat challenging.
Yeah.
I have no trouble not eating, but I
Yeah.
do feel a little fatigued at the end of that first day.
Right.
Right. And then by day 3, I have so much energy. I wake up every one of my sleep cycles. I just wake up and then go back to sleep and wake up and go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
And I do kind of a pretty advanced vinyasa flow yoga class.
Okay, yeah.
And when I'm on my 3 or 4 days of my fast, 4 days of my fast, I can do that class and not even and not even feel any fatigue at all.
Yeah.
Because your body's really happy burning ketones. So I would say though, for those folks who are kind of adapted, fat adapted,
Yes.
I would say they should probably do an intermittent fast, if not daily.
Yep.
Do it 3 or 4 days a week. It's not hard to do.
No,
There's
like-
plenty of people that eat once a day. Right?
Yeah, totally. So myself, I'm kind of sitting around, I'll eat at about 12 or 2
Okay.
each day, finish at about 7 or 8.
Okay.
And once a week, I'll go 24 hours, like dinner to dinner
Okay.
from there. Now, I'm really interested, longer fasts, where
Right.
do they come into play? Because I'm
Yeah.
hearing a lot of information come in right now that like 3 to 5 days is actually really where you start getting
Yes, you don't get full autophagy
Yes,
state
exactly.
until you go 4 or 5 days.
Where do you sit with that?
Again, I would refer to Rhonda Patrick or Walter
Yeah.
Longo or
Yeah.
those who have
Yeah.
really kind of done more the scientific analysis. But I think autophagy is so important to me. I do a 4 to 5 day fast every 2 months because to me
Awesome.
that's kind of on a regular basis.
I like that.
Maybe people can do it every change of the season. So when the seasons change, just do a 4 or 5 day fast.
Yeah.
And you can do it with bone broth. You can do it just water. I do it with water and a little brain octane, right? Because I like having the extra ketones in my system. So you can find kind of what works best for you.
Yeah.
But I'd say at least do it twice a year. You know, I think it's healthy. Your body's going to thank you for it.
I like you looking at this as a calendar. Do you know what I mean? What
Yeah.
do we do each day? What do we do each week, each month, each season, yearly, and moving from there?
Yeah.
I kind of like.
Yeah, I can't stress how important fasting is.
What do you do currently at the moment?
Well, intermittent fast on a daily basis,
Yes.
but again, Rhonda Patrick says if you have fat coffee, you're not fasting.
You know,
It's going to not get fat.
That's a great point because
Yeah.
I heard her say that, and I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? That totally makes sense with me. If you are having something, you are having a metabolic process going on,
Right.
And there can be a bit of a shunt. At the same time, if it's going to get you to fast a little bit longer, maybe
You can make
not-
it easy for you to fast, right?
Totally. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? So
yeah.
I found my wife can happily have, say, a bulletproof coffee.
Right.
8, 9 o'clock, and she can go a little bit longer and cruise.
Right.
I myself probably find it a little bit easier. Maybe I'll have like a black coffee.
Right.
At about 10, 11. If I need something like a bulletproof or something like that later, I might go for it. But
Right.
I kind of find if I get over that 10 a.m. hump, I find for me,
Yeah.
I can go to 2 p.m. and not even think about it.
Yeah.
Like I did yesterday, it got to 3 p.m. and I was like, I've got to go train. And I was like, I'm just going to have to train fasted right now, and then I'll eat after it from there.
Yeah.
Move on.
Do you have any problems when you go training without having eaten at all?
I don't think so.
Right.
I'm still playing with that at the moment, to be honest. I'm
Okay.
still going.
Because you're built, right? You're lifting heavy weights.
Today
right?
I
Yeah.
trained fasted as well.
Okay.
So I ate just before I came here, and
Okay.
I weight trained for about 50 minutes just before I came.
Okay.
I found my strength isn't quite there,
Right.
but I can still get through it. And I think at the same time, it's like, look, you should be a little bit anti-fragile at the end of the day.
Yes.
Like just because, I didn't get to eat, do you know what I mean? Don't be a delicate little snowflake and not train or like not
Yeah.
go through it. I think you
Yeah.
should still be able to persevere and get through, and maybe it's not optimal,
Yes.
but at the end of the day, you still got to perform.
Yes. So get back to your question. A 24-hour fast, at least. Well, that's not always true, but once a week on average,
Yep.
probably.
Yep.
Sometimes twice a week, sometimes I don't do it at all. When I travel to New York, because I go to New York quite a bit
Yep.
for work, I'll have dinner, let's say I'm flying on Tuesday, I'll have dinner Monday night, just have water all day Tuesday, and then have dinner when I get to New York on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's my 24-hour fast. And then I'll do my 4 or 5 day fast every 2 months.
Awesome.
I think I'm due for one now. It's,
Okay.
you know, it's
I'm
coming up.
gonna jump into that. I'm gonna give that 5 day a go. I haven't done that yet. So
Yeah.
Okay.
It's once you get used to it, it's actually pretty easy. You have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And this is my theory. Again, this is just my theory.
Yeah.
Is if you look evolutionarily, kind of how we functioned when we were tribal. We as men, it's easier. Women probably could do the same thing because there wasn't always food.
Yeah.
But we would have to leave the tribe and go hunt for food.
Yeah.
And we might be 3-4 days without having captured something that we can then eat.
Yeah.
And the longer your body goes, the more efficient it gets at generating energy, which is why I think you wake up every sleep cycle like wide awake.
Yes.
It's not like you're wired or you're running, your thoughts are running. Your body's just saying, okay, let's go see if we can catch something.
Yeah.
Sulforaphane is I think, a classic example. And Rhonda Patrick's done a lot of studies on sulforaphane because
Yeah.
she's into anti-aging. So it's not just for cancer, but
Yes.
just for the health of your mitochondria and your telomeres, the length of your telomeres. And so, I don't have a lot of stuff that I eat during the day that has sulforaphane in it.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, broccoli sprouts are the best source.
Yeah.
Actually, not. The best source is, I'm drawing a blank right now, but it's a powder that I get. But I use broccoli sprouts because they're alive,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
not the powder. It's slipping me right now, but I can show you when we go inside.
I'll grab it. I'll take a photo and
Okay.
I'll put it on later. For
Okay,
sure. That'd be great.
I will. So the shake gives me a chance to kind of throw that stuff in there,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's nice to mix things up.
Yes.
Right? Don't have protein every single day.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when
yeah.
you do have protein, don't have the same amount of protein every
And not the
single
same
day.
source,
Don't
not
have the
the
same
same
source of
amounts,
protein every
yeah.
single day. Right? And so this is just another way of kind of creating that little bit of, hermetic, whatever you call
Yeah.
it, ebb and flow
Yeah.
effect. And so I could send you a list of what's in my current shake, but it's constantly a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's always,
Yeah.
you learn something new and you
Yeah.
say, okay, I'm going to take this out, put this in.
Yeah.
Now creatine, I try to have creatine every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I put that in my shake, and I also put in other things too if I'm not having a shake that day, because I just think it's really important.
Would there be some key nutrients that you're a big fan of and you think something should be not obviously
Yes,
all the time, but
I
more
would
often?
say the number. There's a couple of things. Cancer, obviously, there's some supplements that you should take that are not just generally available, not required for people that are not cancering. But
Yep.
I'd say vitamin D
Yep.
with K
Yep.
together, and sunlight's probably the best source to get your vitamin D. And so if you can get sunlight, that's what I try to do. But Thorne makes a good product
Yeah.
that has both.
Yep.
It's a 10-to-1 ratio
Yep.
of K to D, or D to K. Let's see. I'm just trying to think of what are the best things that I think are with sulforaphane. We talked about curcumin, turmeric.
Okay, yeah.
That's really therapeutic, right?
Type of curcumin?
I take it every which way I can.
Okay, yeah, right.
I take the roots when they're in season. Right now they're not, so
Yep.
I can't buy them locally at the co-op.
Yep.
And I grate those up and I put them
Yeah.
in things.
Yeah.
I also take, Thorne makes a curcumin product.
Mhm.
Ryan Muncie's company has a version.
Yeah,
He
that's
just
right.
gave me a sample. I've been trying
Awesome.
his. His is supposed to be very bioavailable.
Awesome.
So I take that as well. And then I use the powder too when I use my powder
Yeah.
tea.
Yeah.
And I think if you follow Ben's theories on this, it's a good way of assimilating what it is you're consuming with the turmeric.
Yes.
Right, so I try to do that with my supplements.
Yep.
Whether I'm doing it with my shake or I'm just doing it with the powder argo tea. And when I make the shake, I put the powder argo tea right in the shake.
That's really
So
good.
I always have
do
powder
like
argo
that.
tea.
Yeah.
every
Okay.
day.
All right. D, sulforaphane,
Mhm.
curcumin, anything else?
Vitamin C.
Yep.
Vitamin C is very important.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is in normal traditional doses, vitamin C is an antioxidant.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're taking, let's say, 2,000 milligrams, or even 4,000 milligrams, spreading out through the day, it's an antioxidant. But what I do is, as a cancer patient, is I take really high doses,
Yeah.
like 75,000 milligrams.
Yep.
And I do that as an IV, and you can also do liposomal
Yep.
and get some similar benefits. But at that high dose, it becomes a superoxidant,
Yes.
right? With the process, of the conversion process in your mitochondria with iron, it converts to hydrogen peroxide, which is what you want in your system to kill the cancer cells. So a lot of my protocols are high oxidative stress protocols. Things like hyperbaric oxygen, right?
Yep.
You're going to an oxygen chamber.
Yep.
Ozone, right? You're using ozone. High dose vitamin C. These are high oxidative stresses.
Let's go down that because even just before I came here to Santa Monica, back in Bali, I was it's about once a week. Sometimes it'll slip to once every 2 weeks.
Right.
Where I was doing IV, vitamin C, magnesium, glutathione,
Right, magnesium's important.
B's.
Right.
Where do you see, like, is that something you use often? Like, is this kind of a protocol that you, on a general day-to-day basis, or in the cancering process, this comes
I think the
in there as
cancering
well?
process, you have to be a lot more educated
Yeah.
as to exactly what doses you should be taking and
Yeah.
how your body's reacting to those.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a sad commentary about the medical system generally, but you know, I've seen quite a few doctors and I've done a lot of blood work, and they traditionally they might go through and circle a few things and say, okay, this looks higher, this looks low, but nobody really sits you down and says, okay, wait a second, let's really analyze your pathways here.
Yeah.
Let's look at your methylation status. Let's look
Yeah.
at all this stuff and decide what it is, why you're deficient here.
Yes.
Right? You might not be deficient here because you're not taking enough of it.
Yeah.
You're deficient here because your body's just not processing it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going through its normal part of the process.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, it would be nice if people had better hand-holding there. But I'd say, to answer your question, if you're in a cancering state, then you want to have a lot more hand-holding and make sure that whatever you're taking fits with your needs.
It's a great point. Do you know Dr. Mark Schaus? He
don't.
wrote the book Achieving Victory Over a Toxic World. Anyway,
Okay.
I've done some learning from him before. I've gone through like lab analysis course, and does the thing sitting there. There's a very big difference between getting a lab test done
Right.
and saying, okay, these are out of ranges,
Right.
compared to, well, what's going on? Let's look at this puzzle right now.
Right.
And what are the connections between everything? And I think that's a really good point that you brought up, where somebody needs that proper analysis between
Right.
to find the why behind what's going
And
on.
the problem is it takes some time
Yeah.
and work
Yeah.
and understanding. Like, you need somebody who understands those processes,
Yeah.
who's going to take the time to sit down and read your charts.
Yeah, totally.
And a doctor can't do that.
No.
You're going to get 7 or 15 minutes of their time
Yeah,
in
well,
a visit.
wasn't it
wouldn't
like, yeah, it was like 8 to 10 minutes
Yeah.
for an average visit. Like,
Yeah,
you can't
yeah.
do any, especially when you come in, you say hi, there's a little bit of chit chat, then you say
Yeah.
hi, there's.
Yeah. So how you feeling? Okay, good. Continue doing what
See
you're
ya.
doing.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
In the cancering process, if we can go in depth into this,
Sure.
into that right now.
Sure.
Treatment-wise,
Mhm.
what did you go through
Okay.
at the start?
Okay.
What was your inner dialogue as into this is what I'm going to be doing? You've kind of touched on, you started on the
fasting.
The fasting.
Right.
What was steps after that?
Okay. I'm a firm believer that if you have an acute condition, there's nothing better than Western medicine.
Yes.
Right. So if you're in a car accident,
Yeah, I break
you want
my
to
arm,
be
do
at the best hospital in America. You don't want to be in some jungle clinic in the jungles of Central America.
Yeah.
But if you have a chronic condition, a lot of that kind of more natural, kind of more integrative, I think, approach is likely to have better results. My condition had some acute elements to it because I couldn't urinate. I was having trouble urinating because my prostate was so swollen. It was shutting down my urethra, and I couldn't. It was really hard. My bladder was full. It was awful. And so I did kind of a treatment protocol called androgen deprivation, where they give you Casodex to kind of shut off your receptors, and I was taking Lupron, there's different versions of it that shut off your body's production of testosterone.
Yep.
And that shrink, and even if you don't have cancer, if you just have a swollen prostate, benign prostate hyperplasia, that treatment can be used to kind of help shrink that back down to normal. And so that was very effective. It just cleared it up pretty quickly, which was obviously a big relief. And so to answer your question about treatments, so I cycle off the ADT and then I cycle back on depending upon how my body's reacting to my PSA levels and other things like that. And just so your listeners know that, the doctors won't tell you that you can cycle off ADT. They say you're going to take this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of research on PubMed, and even the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture the products have done tests and have concluded that there's nothing wrong with. They said there's no benefit to cycling off,
Yeah.
which is complete bunk.
Yeah.
Because your body doesn't function the way it should if you have no testosterone at all.
Yes.
And it's not just a sexual thing. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of
Yeah.
other things like how your bones kind of regenerate, and all these other things are affected by testosterone. And so it's really important to know that yes, you can cycle off and cycle back on. And so that's the only standard of care I did. I did see an oncologist who was one of the top oncologists in prostate, as a prostate oncologist here in Los Angeles, who actually looked at me and he said, they're doing all these studies now, and if you do this certain chemotherapy drug in conjunction with your ADT, it'll extend your life by 7 months. And I remember looking at him, and I remember thinking, I can't believe he just said that. And I held my tongue for a minute, and then I said, I can't believe you just said that. I said, because how do you know when a person would have died?
Sorry, that's just about to say.
Right, how do you know? I mean, okay, you died on January 6th, and you would have, now you're going to live to June 6th.
Yeah.
How do you know this?
Yeah, totally.
You don't know this. There's so many variables.
Yeah. How can they say that?
They say that because it's all based on statistics.
Right.
So they do these statistical analyses, and they take a group of controlled patients, and they give some a placebo effect and some this, and then they compare the lifespan. But you don't know, like, this guy was a smoker, this guy, this guy does yoga, this guy meditates. You don't know what people are doing to be healthy.
Amount of variables.
Yes. They call them confounding factors. The confounding factors are way outweigh, and what about the placebo effect, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, first of all, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah.
I said, because how could you possibly know that? And I said, second of all, I would rather die 7 months early than go through chemotherapy.
Yeah.
So let's just be clear on that.
Yeah.
That's not an option.
Wow.
And he said, okay, that's your choice.
Yeah.
And just as, again, I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to dissuade people from following their doctor's advice, and I got to be really careful about this because that's not my role.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kind of alternative treatment stuff that I talk about, you can do in conjunction with standard of care and have better results. For example, if you fast before you do chemotherapy, you're going to not lose your hair as much. You're not going to have those mouth sores as much. You're not going to throw up as. I mean, sometimes you have people go through that process without any symptoms at all.
Wow.
Just because they're now in a high state of ketosis, and their mitochondria and their healthy cells are able to function quite well, notwithstanding all that chemotherapy. So, again, I'm not a doctor, but you see these studies where they say, okay, well, I was sitting in my oncologist's office because I go every month to get my blood tested. And there was a magazine sitting there, and it was a magazine specifically for small cell lung cancer. I can't believe they have a magazine just for small cell lung cancer, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And at the cover was an article about this wonderful new drug that extended lifespan by 30-40% or something. I thought, oh, let me check this out. So I opened the magazine. The first 2 pages was a full 2-page ad by the drug company that manufactured that drug that was on the cover of the magazine. So you can kind of see pay to play, right? So I get to the article, and they're talking about the statistics. I stumble on that word a little bit. And they said the average person will die after 9.6 months, but if you take this new using standard chemotherapy, with this new chemotherapy drug, you can live for 13.8 months. And I remember thinking, God, how often that must be for a person to look at a doctor and say, okay, instead of dying in 9 months, you're going to die in 14 months.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Really? And I know people have lung cancer that have had for years. Years. Right? I'm not saying people don't die from lung cancer, don't die quickly from lung cancer. I'm just saying you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
Totally.
Right? So I think the most important takeaway is probably, assess the condition with your doctor's advice.
Yeah.
If it's acute, address the acute parts of it.
Yes.
And if you can wait and see, adopt the wait and see attitude.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
See how your body responds.
What got you to say, I will not do chemo when you first did that?
I think it's because I was born a skeptic, and I've been very skeptical of, one of the nice things about my approach as an attorney and looking at this stuff is I see context. That's what we're trained to do as lawyers, is to look at context and look at evidence. And I'm not a trial lawyer, I'm a transaction lawyer, but I still was trained in that way classically. And so, you can kind of see behind what you're being told. And get a sense. And so when I look at evidence-based medicine, I have to snicker, right? Or at least
you're looking at the why.
I'm looking at it, I'm saying, wait a second, this is not evidence. This is somebody's interpretation of numbers, right? And who's paying them, right? And who's looking for this outcome, right? And so when you look at that, you kind of say, wait a second. And I think I've kind of adopted a very skeptical attitude towards a lot of these treatments. Right? Historically, how chemotherapy was discovered? It was during, I think, World War I. They discovered that soldiers who had been exposed to mustard gas, it stopped the development of their the bone marrow. And so they used it for bone cancer to slow down the growth of bone cancer. They used mustard gas. That was the first chemotherapy.
Wow. That's scary.
Yeah, they're doing autopsies on dead soldiers, and they're like, look at this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, saying no to chemo, going through the steps into it. If we kind of like fast.
Oh wait! Let me interrupt you one quick second, because again, I want to make it very clear. I'm not saying don't say no. Don't follow my advice on chemo, but there is a process that's used in Europe. In Germany, I think probably has the most cutting edge medicine, where they use the insulin potentiation treatment (IPT) as part of the chemotherapy process. And I think it's brilliant if you just look at it logically, which is what I do, or try to. And that is, okay, we know that cancer thrives on glucose, right? That's how these scans work when they're looking for cancer in your body, right? They put glucose with radioisotopes in your blood, and then they have you sit there, and then they put a machine, where is it going? And they say, oh, look, it's all collecting here. That's cancer. So we know cancer will basically take all the glucose before your other cells get a chance. And so what they do with the IPT is I think they use insulin, or they use drugs to kind of really reduce your blood sugar down to a very low level, almost to the point where you can't get out of bed. And then they give you chemotherapy, lower doses of it, low doses with glucose. And so what that does is it's like the Trojan horse. It goes right to the cancer. You know, and so there are other ways you can do chemotherapy that are not as, I think, as impacting. I think they're if people have blood cancer, there are certain chemotherapy where they take the blood out of your body. They run the chemotherapy, and they take the chemotherapy out, and they put the blood back in. There are other things you can do that are standard of care that are not so devastating. So one of the things that I really kind of focused on, and I don't know if this is where your question was going, because I didn't want you to finish your question, but is, okay, I wanted to pick protocols that I thought would best address the cancer, but also pick protocols that are going to be least detrimental to my healthy mitochondria. Right. And so chemotherapy kind of doesn't really satisfy that step, unless you're doing IPT, in which case it's probably less problematic.
Can we talk more into the cancer as a metabolic issue?
Sure.
And how insulin can be a big factor of this.
Right.
How do you explain to someone on a complete bare level, I know nothing walking into this, I'm swimming in ignorance right now.
Right.
What kind of cancer as a metabolic issue is?
Okay. The normal cells use a respiratory process that burns oxygen, and you need oxygen to function in a normal, healthy mitochondria. Okay. What Otto Warburg got the Nobel Prize for is he discovered that there's a common trait amongst all cancer cells, and that is they're no longer respirating. They're going through an entirely different way of creating energy. Instead of using the standard form of respiration, they're fermenting. Right, which is the way life forms kind of grew before we had mammals on the planet, because it was a low oxygen environment, right? And so the fermentation process, interestingly enough, has the effect of not only facilitating the proliferation of the cancer cells themselves, but it also creates a lot of lactic acid in the neighborhood, wherever that cancer cell is residing, that then I think causes the healthy cells to become subject to this whole thing Otto Warburg talked about, the T biome, right? Right, the putrefaction, it kind of kills the cells, and so it has that kind of two-edged effect. So what you want to do is you want to try to create an environment that's very toxic to those cells. And so that's why I use a lot of oxygen therapies, because I think they can't thrive in an oxygen environment, and some of them don't do very well. Obviously, if they're exposed to hydrogen peroxide, it kills them. It can kill the cells. So that's the common trait of all cancer cells. Okay. In order to do that, there's two fuel sources. The primary one is glucose. Okay, which is why I think the ketogenic diet is now becoming kind of the standard. There's also glutamine, which is, you can't really take glutamine out of your diet because it's in everything, and your body needs it to function. But if you study the works of Tom Seifried and some of the others, they're testing some drugs that allow you to use a pulse effect, like I do with my ADT, cycling on and off, where you kind of shut down the glutamine part of the pathway. Therefore, now they have glucose, no glucose, and no glutamine. Now they're definitely going to starve. Right? It's a good way of starting the cancer. So that's kind of the cutting edge that you can do that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, now taking it to when did you know that you were in the clear?
Okay, I'll be very careful here, because a lot of the podcasts that I've done, when I look at the headline, which I didn't write, it says, man cures himself. It kind of always makes you feel, wait a second. That's why I like cancering again, too, because it kind of takes it out of that, you're here or here, and shows that it's it's a spectrum, and it's a moving process. But I realized that I was, again, it was low PSA levels. My urologist, who did an ultrasound and a digital exam, said your lymph nodes are all back to normal, because my prostate was outside the prostate, and he said your prostate feels perfectly normal. There's no evidence at all that you have cancer, right? So obviously, you could do more scans. I'm always reluctant to put radioisotopes in my body, so I only do those when it's really feel it's absolutely necessary. So that was 7 months after I was diagnosed, and but again, I'm not letting my guard down.
Yeah.
I'm continuing to do hyperbaric once a week, and I'm continuing to do my high dose vitamin C, and I probably do the rest of my life. But to me, that's a fair trade-off.
Totally.
That's a fair trade-off.
And taking that and out and being able to share it with the listener right now, what do you think they should be doing? We've kind of touched on how often should you be fasting, and
Right.
even a couple of the key nutrients.
Right.
What do you think is like a standard of what can we be doing each day, each week, each season, each year
Right.
to make sure that we're on the healing state rather than the cancering state?
Yeah. Okay. It would take a long time for me to go through all of it.
Yeah.
On my website, I spent months trying to organize it all.
Yeah.
I create this grid, and my grid is based on. What I found the most challenging, and we were talking about this earlier, right? Is there's this tired cliche of drinking from a fire hose, and this, I think, when you're trying to understand cancering, that's a classic example of what that must be like, because there's just so much information, there's so many moving pieces. So I'm struggling with how do I make this digestible, useful, because there's just so much out there. There's a lot of good websites out there that cover a lot of the same things that I talk about, but it's just a smattering of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And how do you and I have the same problem, because I think grounding is important.
Yep.
I think sunlight's important.
Yep.
I think hydration is important, right?
Yep.
Not only for the functioning of your cell, but for the detoxification process. I think sleep is important,
Yep.
right? If you're not sleeping, we didn't even touch on cannabis, right? The whole idea of using cannabis.
Interesting. I just interviewed a couple of guys a couple of days ago about CBD and THC.
Okay.
And that as well.
I'd love to hear. I can't wait to hear that
Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah.
because that's an area that I've also dipped my toe. And and when I say dip my toe, I did Rick Simpson oil for a period of time,
Yep.
and then I just did CBD oil for a period of time.
Yep.
And again, leaving aside the whole cannabinoid system, which is new science, right? We don't really fully understand how our cells use this system.
Yep.
My theory, and again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, my theory is it has to do with intercellular communication.
Yeah.
The cannabinoids, right?
Yep.
CBDs, the ecocannabinoids, the ones our body produces
Yep.
exogenously,
Yep.
right? But I think that if you leave that aside, because we don't understand that, and I think that's a big leaving aside, because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But if you kind of look at it from a more kind of practical perspective, your body's only healing when it's when it's sleeping, and when it's in the parasympathetic state. And I don't know if you've ever dabbled in cannabis, but if you Rick Simpson oil, there's two benefits you get by doing that is you sleep like a rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it keeps you in that parasympathetic state, because you have that little edge off all the time. I didn't like the psychotropic effects when I was doing full dose. It got to be too much for me.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided just to do CBD.
Yeah.
And I actually have some ideas as to how you might find the right balance of THC to CBD.
Yeah, okay,
Because
yeah.
the more CBD you have, the less psychotropic effect the THC has.
Yes.
Right? Which is why people that like to get stoned want that very little CBD and a lot of THC.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think medicinally you probably would want less THC and more CBD.
Okay, interesting, because the last few nights what I've been doing after dinner is having, it was like 3 to 4 squirts of the CBD and like 1 or 2 of the THC.
Right.
And some of them I've done no THC whatsoever and just gone the CBD as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm using this to track my sleep.
Okay.
To see, do you know what I mean, what's going on with my sleep. But the other thing as well is like there's other variables such as, well, does my 4-year-old daughter wake up and jump into our bed? Do you know what I mean? Do I wake up with a foot into my face? And like, there's those things as well. So there's variables such as life.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Yeah.
So you haven't been doing it long enough to see what the results
No,
are.
not yet,
Yeah.
but I'm tracking it, getting pretty geeky into it. But yeah, it's something, it's funny you brought that up. That's really interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I mean that takes us down a totally different pathway. A totally different pathway.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to your question about what can people be doing, so there's all of that, right? Sleep, right?
Yep.
Breath work.
Yeah.
I don't know if you meditate. I think meditating is really important.
Yep.
It's interesting because I dabbled with meditation for a long time. Once I get diagnosed with cancer, I signed up for TM.
Yeah.
And I figure if I have skin in the game, maybe I'll actually do it every day. Because it was when my mind's always going, right? So it's not easy for me to meditate, but I do it now. I do it regularly now, and I think that's really important. And obviously I'm blessed here because I can go to the beach in 5 minutes, and in 10 minutes I'm at the beach, and so I can go down there, get in the ocean, and get grounded, and get my.
I'm a
get
big believer of that. I always need to be. I feel like I need to be near the ocean. I need to be doing in the salt water.
Yes.
Like a good day. If I ever feel frazzled or too stressed, I feel like a day of just getting some sun, going for a swim or a surf,
Right.
fixes me.
Yes.
Completely fixes me.
Yes.
And even my wife has said, like, she knows that if I get like too frazzled, that I just need to be near the water.
Yes.
I need to see it, I need to be in it, and then it kind of like cleans the soul, kind of wipes the windshield clean, and you keep it.
It's so healthy.
Yeah.
It's so healthy. So all of those things I think are going to be really healthy just to maintain it. For a person who doesn't have cancer, but certainly for the person with cancer to help them get back to a healing state. But the person just wants to stay in a healing state.
Yes.
Nutritionally, I'd say that you have to decide what works best for you.
Yeah.
I don't think sugar is good for anybody.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. I don't think grains are good for anybody. Some people can assimilate them better than others.
Yeah.
Some people have no effect.
Great.
It's still not a good
Yeah.
source of nutrients, right?
Yeah.
Which makes the whole kind of vegan vegetarian diet difficult.
Yeah.
Right? Because your energy sources are fat, carbohydrates, and protein, right? And your body can only assimilate a certain amount of protein. You're a bodybuilder. You can probably get 25% of your calories from protein and be fine.
Yeah.
Somebody like me, I probably 15% of
Yeah.
my calories should be protein
Yeah.
because I don't have to support all that muscle mass. And once you go over that, then gluconeogenesis kicks in, and you might as well just have your cookies, right? So if you take out
And
the
protein
fat,
can be very insulogenic as well.
yes,
So,
it can, and I think over-consuming food creates a big problem with insulin. And that's what I struggle with because I love to eat.
Good.
So, but I think so. How do you got to get your fat levels up? People are still fat phobic.
Yeah.
We've been trained for so long,
Yeah.
especially saturated fat, to think
Yeah.
it's bad,
Yeah.
that they just kind of subconsciously shy away from it. And so my diet is what I call kind of a high fiber ketogenic diet. It's mostly plant-based fat.
Yeah.
I do have, I'm not afraid to have some animal fat, but it's got to be grass-fed, clean,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Most of my fat comes from avocados, olive oil, coconuts, nuts. It's all plant-based
Yeah.
fats.
Yeah.
And one of the things I struggled with when I was kind of trying to sort all this stuff out is there really are two, I think, efficacious dietary regimens. There's the whole plant-based diet,
Yeah.
which Crispy Cancer promotes, and the Gerson Protocol promotes.
Yeah.
A lot of people promote that. And then there's the ketogenic diet, right? And it's like, okay, how could they both be? This one has a lot of sugar in it,
Yeah.
right? Because you're consuming a lot of sugar-based food.
Yeah.
This one is a lot of fat. And I was talking to a gentleman who, his name is Q Collins, Dr. Q Collins. He's not an MD, he's a scientist, but he's doing a whole study into deuterium depletion. And they had this was the Metabolic Therapeutics Conference in Tampa, and they had a whole bunch of speakers talking about deuterium and the effect of deuterium on the mitochondria. And of course, I hear that, and my ears perk up, and I think, ooh, this is gonna be fun. Can't wait to get my teeth in this one. And so I did a lot of diligence on the whole idea of what deuterium is and how it works. Turns out that, you aware of Pollock's work, the fourth phase of water? Have you studied it? Oh boy, we're gonna have so much fun on our next podcast because he gets really into this whole idea of exclusion zone water. Okay, exclusion zone water is the fourth phase of water. We're aware of water as a liquid, as a solid, ice, and as a gas and steam. But the fourth phase of water is like a gelatinous version of water that actually is the water that's in our cells, and it's also the water that's in plants. It's the water that I think that kind of fuels a lot of life forms, right? And it's the reason they call it exclusion zone is because you can actually distill out any toxic substances in water if you were able to create hydrophilic environment and allow that exclusion zone to be created. Even if it's like toxic sewer water with chemicals in it, that little bit of exclusion zone water around the hydrophilic will have nothing in it. It'll be perfectly clean. So water has this natural tendency to go into this fourth state. The reason I raise that is because I think the plant-based diet, you're drinking a lot of water out of plants, and that's all low deuterium water. And also, when I was talking to Dr. Q, he said, well, the high-fat diet is also a deuterium depletion diet. So both of those diets reduce the amount of deuterium in your system. And deuterium is a hydrogen molecule that's twice the size of a normal hydrogen molecule, and it's a very, very minute element. It's like 0.05 of the total amount of hydrogen, which is only the total amount of the atmosphere. But when it gets into mitochondria, it just gums up the works. So you want to get as much of that out of your system as you possibly can. And so that's why I think having a mostly plant-based high-fat diet is a good way to go. And I say mostly plant-based because I don't think you can get all your nutrients.
Yeah.
You need to have some good protein sources.
Yeah.
You need to have your vitamin B12. You need to have a lot of things that you can get from healthy meat, but you don't need a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right? Something like me, I could do 4 or 5 ounces a day, and it's plenty.
Yeah.
Because I just need that nutrient.
One thing, and I know this is a complete tangent, we're good at this, is like as you said, over here there's the vegan, over here there's the ketosis, and I find that a big problem is we're all on the same team.
Right.
We all want to be healthy individually.
Right.
We all want to progress and be better.
Right.
There's no need for us to sit on different teams right now
Right.
and have like a complete bias and a dogmatic approach that
Right.
kind of shuns the other person. No, you're wrong, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
you're sitting over on there, you're wearing that jersey right now.
Right, right.
How do you help, or how do you, because I really feel like the way you've gone through this is
Right.
seeing everything. You even said, I mean, your approach has been very, okay, let me question
Right.
and see what's going on behind it. And I love that because you've been able to get such good answers because you're asking really good questions.
Right.
And you're walking against everybody and saying, like, what's good, what's bad. A vegan,
Right.
and they're listening to you say, eat meat, and suddenly they're like, doing the defenses come up.
Right.
It's the wrong way to look at it. Listen to the information. How do you help somebody actually?
Okay,
get
yeah,
right
that's
advice?
that's a fabulous question. It's almost like religion or politics.
Yeah, totally.
It's crazy.
It's-
It's crazy.
it's
And I
nuts.
don't try to dissuade anybody. In fact, we were talking about the placebo effect.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza's
Yeah.
work. And I had a conversation with one of my subscribers, and I was explaining to her my diet, and she says, "I'm just not comfortable eating meat." And I said, look, don't eat meat.
Yeah.
If you honestly think
Yeah.
that diet's going to make you healthy, do
It
that
will
diet.
do- yeah.
Because the placebo
Yes.
effect is going to have much more of a profound
Love that
impact
you said that.
than just following my dogmatic approach.
I love that you said that.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially if you have the flip side to think my diet's going to make you unhealthy. Now you have the nocebo
Yeah,
effect
yeah.
on top of that.
Yeah.
Right? So do it. Just do it. But I said, but only do it if you're convinced that's right, and just do it 100%.
Yeah.
Don't dabble 80-20,
Yeah,
none of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
None of that. Just go all hog wild.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't, I can't say what works for somebody else either, right? Everyone has to decide what works for themselves. And I have my own biases in that regard,
Yeah.
but I try not to impose them on people, right? I might look at them and judge them, but I won't say anything. I keep my judgment to myself.
That's good. Okay. Oh God, I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking this. I'm going to have to beg, plead, and get you back on because this is so
No, I'm
good.
thrilled.
I cannot
I'm so happy we
stop.
have a
I
chance to
just
meet.
cannot
Yeah,
stop.
yeah.
To let the listeners walk away,
Uh-huh.
take some real action upon what we've been able to discuss today.
Right.
What is it that you want from them? What is it that you want from them to be able to do to take care of themselves?
Right.
And to move forward from this?
Okay. I would say people have to recognize that we're, as living creatures, we're constantly changing.
Yeah.
There's a process that we go through in our microbiome and our systems, and people think they have to rush into things. So the takeaway, I think, number one takeaway should be, look, slow down, analyze your options, figure out what's right for you, do your homework. I think that's the most important thing. The most important takeaway, now I got two, is that even the best doctor in the world, you could sit down with Chris Kresser, who's arguably like one of the best doctors out there. He's only going to give me an hour or an hour and a half of his time,
Yeah.
right? That's it.
Yeah.
And he can convey a lot of good information,
Yeah.
but that's still only an hour and a half of his time. And the amount of information that you have to assimilate, sift through, and then adopt and incorporate into your life, you can't convey in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And so, and if you're dealing with standard of care doctors, evidence-based doctors, then you're dealing with people that know a lot about a very, very narrow segment of what it takes to be healthy. And so I think it's really incumbent upon everyone to kind of take a proactive role. And not everyone can do that, but those that can need to be able to do the research. And so what I'm trying to offer to people, and I'm hoping that you find my website useful in this regard. And by the way, it's not optimized for mobile devices yet, so please go to your computer and look at it. If you look on your phone, you'll be like, oh, I can't look at all this stuff. And I'll do a version where I have more videos and stuff that's friendlier for mobile devices. Yeah. But I try to take all that information and put it in a format where people can digest it, sift through it, understand it, and then figure out how best to incorporate it into their lives.
Yes.
And so, by all means, visit the website. Give me your email so I can get you on my list and make sure I keep you updated.
Yeah. Highly recommend that. The link will be below for you.
Yeah, it's questtocurecancer.com. Is
You're phenomenal. It was so funny, like sitting the other day, we were down at the Bulletproof Cafe, I was sitting there with Ryan after doing some work with him, and
Such a good guy.
He's awesome, Ryan's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then he introduced us, and I was just like, and having already listened to some episodes of you, I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe we're talking. I'm so happy. So
I can't wait to hear about your book, and I'm looking forward.
No, it's been great, and that's why I've really wanted to dive into this, and there's going to be so much more that we're going to be able to do, but I feel like what you're bringing to the table, I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful for it.
Right.
It's so needed, and that's why I wanted to come to this conversation both from the perspective of somebody that might be dealing with cancer or somebody dealing with health, because for me, when I was listening to the first episode that I heard of you, the selfish self was coming through, and I was like, I'm doing it all right. I'm trying to be healthy. Do you know what I mean? Be in shape and do all that good stuff. I know, like, I've done like the 23andMe genetic testing, and doing heart disease and prostate cancer was the one that came up highest for me. So like, it was all these kind of like lights were flicking off, and just like, oh my god, like, do you know what I mean? Is this going to be me? So I really want to make sure that, okay, what can we be doing on a daily basis? How do we understand this process? And I think you're doing a fantastic job of being able to do that. So
Thank you.
Really
It's my pleasure. I'm so glad we had a chance to meet.
Awesome. So I highly recommend, click the link below, get a part of absolutely everything Eric is doing, get on his list as well. Now, any questions at all that you have, we would love for you to please comment below, ask the questions, because when I come back, when we get Eric back on the show, we're going to be diving into those, and we want to make sure that you have the answers you want. And as always, thank you so much for being here, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you.
This is where I want to make sure that you get the most out of being here, and I want to hear from you. So if you've enjoyed this episode, click like, and make sure I can send you the new episodes each and every week. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, I really want to make sure that I'm giving you exactly what you need. So comment below. I want to know what you're going to take away from this episode. And the best conversations after every episode always happen in the Breaking Success Tribe. I'll pop a link below for you to join the free group, so you get access to the guides, the live streams. I'm in there answering your questions personally each and every day. Plus you get all the episodes as well. So thank you so much for being here and joining us. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.